What is the final piece of the prophecy? It's a question that whispers in the back of the mind, a low hum beneath the roar of breaking news and the clamor of political debate. It's a question that sends a seeker of truth not just to the glowing screens of the present, but back, far back, into the dust and parchment of the ancient world. Before me, digital maps of contested borders flicker and bleed into the fragile, sepia-toned lines of empires long since crumbled to sand. The world sees a geopolitical chessboard, a complex game of oil, power, and ideology. But if you listen closely, if you know where to look, you can discern the outlines of a much older story, a cosmic drama whose script was written thousands of years ago. A story reaching its final, terrifying act. At the heart of this drama lies a nation that shouldn't exist, Israel, a sliver of land, a promise whispered to a patriarch in the Mesopotamian dawn. A people forged in slavery, given a law in the wilderness, and promised a home. They rose and they fell. Their kings, their prophets, their triumphs and their sins fill the pages of the world's most read book. Then they were shattered, dispersed by the iron fist of Rome, scattered to the four corners of the earth for nearly 2,000 years. A footnote in history, a wandering people with a memory of a homeland. And then the impossible happened. Against all logic, against the tides of history, the first piece of the prophecy slammed into place. In 1948, Israel was reborn. The Hebrew language, dormant for centuries, once again filled the streets of Jerusalem. The Star of David, a symbol of hope and persecution, was raised over a sovereign nation. For those who watch, for those who listen to the ancient echoes, this was not a political accident. It was a sign. The fulfillment of dozens of prophecies from Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, who all foretold a day when the scattered children of Israel would be gathered from the nations and brought back to their own land. A land that would blossom again like a rose in the desert. This miraculous return set the stage. It wound the clock. But a stage requires all its actors to be in place before the final act can begin. For decades, the world focused on Israel's immediate neighbors, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, the primary antagonists in this unfolding story. Treaties were signed, wars were fought, and a tense, fragile peace settled over some borders. Yet all the while, a shadow was stretching from the east. A different kind of power, an ancient power, was stirring. A power with a deep, complex, and chillingly intimate history with the Jewish people. To find its name in the prophetic texts, you must look for the word Persia. Persia. The name itself evokes images of grandeur and might. The empire of Cyrus the Great, of Darius, of Xerxes. An empire of poets and kings, of vast road networks and monumental cities like Persepolis. It is a name etched into the very soul of the Jewish story. For it was Persia under Cyrus that played the role of the divine instrument, the unlikely savior. The scrolls of the prophet Isaiah, written over a century before Cyrus was even born, call him by name, referring to him as God's anointed one, his shepherd, who would issue the decree to set the Jewish exiles free from their Babylonian captivity. And he did. Cyrus's cylinder, a clay artifact now resting in a museum, confirms his policy of liberation, allowing captive peoples to return home and worship their own gods. He was the key that unlocked the door of return, the benevolent hand that allowed the Second Temple to be built in Jerusalem. A Persian king, a Gentile, hailed as a messianic figure. But the history of Persia and the Jews is a story of two faces. A coin with a dark and terrifying reverse. Turn the pages of the biblical scrolls to the book of Esther. Here, in the heart of the very same Persian Empire, another figure emerges from the shadows. Haman the Agagite, a man consumed by a venomous, irrational hatred. He sees the Jewish people not as subjects, but as a blight to be eradicated. His whisper in the king's ear is a plot for genocide, a plan to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all the Jews, young and old, women and children, in a single day. a savior and a would-be destroyer, both born from the same Persian soil. This stunning duality, this historical paradox, is not merely a relic of the past, it is the very template for today. That ancient empire, Persia, has a modern name, Iran. For a time in the 20th century, under the rule of the Shah, Iran wore the face of Cyrus. It was a strategic ally, a partner to Israel in a hostile region. Diplomats and businessmen traveled between Tel Aviv and Tehran. It was a relationship of convenience perhaps, but one of peace. Then came 1979, the revolution. The Shah fell, and the Ayatollah Khomeini rose. And in that moment, the face of Iran changed. The mask of Cyrus was torn away, revealing the snarling, hateful visage of Haman. Overnight, a friend became a sworn enemy. The official rhetoric, broadcast from the highest levels of the new theocratic regime, was no longer about partnership, but annihilation. The state of Israel was branded the Little Satan, a cancerous tumor that must be wiped from the map. These are not the words of a political rival. This is the language of extermination. It is the ancient, genocidal whisper of Haman, now amplified by microphones, broadcast by satellites, and backed by the resources of a powerful modern state. This is the first crucial connection, the historical and spiritual DNA that links the empire of the past with the republic of the present. An ancient power, with a documented history of both saving and attempting to destroy the Jewish people, has once again positioned itself as their ultimate antagonist. The stage is set, the actors are in place, and the script, written thousands of years ago, is about to call for the next scene. The question remains, who are its allies, and what is the catalyst that will finally set the world ablaze? The answer is waiting for us, inscribed in the chilling visions of a prophet who stood by the river Chebar in ancient Babylon. The prophet's name was Ezekiel. He was a priest, carried into exile with his people, a man who had watched the glory of Solomon's temple crumble under the might of Babylon. He was a man broken by loss, living among a broken people. Yet, it was in this state of desolation, by the banks of the Chebar River, that the heavens opened for him. He saw visions of God that were both terrifying and magnificent, wheels within wheels, creatures of lightning and fire. And he was given messages not just for his own time, but for a time far in the future, for what the scriptures call the Acharit Hayamim, the latter days. It is in chapters 38 and 39 of his book that we find the most detailed and perhaps the most frightening military prophecy in the entire Bible. It's a prophecy that has baffled scholars for centuries, but in the blinding light of 21st century geopolitics, its cryptic verses are snapping into focus with breathtaking clarity. The vision begins. Ezekiel is commanded by God to set your face against Gog, of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. This mysterious leader, Gog, is to be the commander of a great horde, a vast coalition of nations that will gather like a storm cloud to descend upon the mountains of Israel. But this isn't an attack on the Israel of Ezekiel's day. The prophecy specifies the target. It will be a people gathered from many nations, brought back from the sword to live on mountains that were long desolate. They will be a people living in apparent security, in unwalled villages, a people who have recovered from war and are at peace. This description is a mirror image of modern Israel, a nation reborn from the ashes of the Holocaust, gathered from over 100 different countries. A land that lay barren for centuries under Ottoman rule, now blooming with agriculture and teeming with high-tech cities. And despite the constant tension, a nation that has built a society of relative prosperity and security, a stark contrast to the chaos surrounding it. The prophecy's target is undeniably the Israel of today. But who is this aggressor, this Gog of the land of Magog? For generations, biblical scholars and historians have wrestled with these ancient names. Flavius Josephus, the first-century Jewish historian, identified Magog with the Scythians, the fierce horsemen who roamed the vast steppes north of the Black and Caspian Seas. This geographical marker is critical. North. The prophecy is explicit. Gog and his horde will come from the uttermost parts of the north. Lay a map of the world before you. Place your finger on Jerusalem. Now draw a line directly north to the uttermost parts. Your finger will land squarely in the heart of one nation, Russia. The historical and geographical connection between Magog, Meshech, and Tubal and the regions of modern-day Russia and parts of Turkey is a cornerstone of this interpretation. Russia, the Great Bear of the North, has long been identified as the leading candidate for this prophesied northern aggressor. For a long time this seemed like a relic of Cold War thinking, a convenient fit for an era defined by the standoff between superpowers. But watch the news today. Witness the resurgence of a powerful expansionist Russia, reasserting its influence across the globe, especially in the Middle East. Watch as it forges new alliances, plants military bases on Syria's coast, and acts as a power broker in the very region where this final battle is prophesied to take place. The northern power is awake, and it is moving. But Russia, or Magog, will not come alone. This is where the prophecy becomes laser-focused, where it names the key partner in this invasion. This is where it provides the irrefutable link to our central question. Ezekiel 38 verse 5 lists the primary allies in Gog's confederacy. The very first name on that list, the lead partner in this axis of invasion, is Persia. Let that sink in. Not Babylon, not Egypt, not Assyria. The prophet, guided by a divine hand, specifically names Persia. 2,600 years ago, a prophecy about a final day's invasion of a regathered Israel names the nation-state of Iran as a principal belligerent, marching alongside a great power from the uttermost north. What was once an obscure verse on a brittle scroll is now a headline. Today, the Russo-Iranian alliance is not a matter of speculation. It is a hard and fast geopolitical reality. It is a strategic, military, and economic partnership that is reshaping the Middle East. We see Iranian drones, the Shahed 136, flying in the skies of Ukraine, deployed by Russian forces. We see Russian S-400 air defense systems potentially being shared with Iran, creating a defensive shield for its most sensitive sites. We see their leaders meeting, their economies intertwining to bypass Western sanctions, their militaries conducting joint naval drills in the Indian Ocean. They are united by a common foe, the United States, and its primary ally in the region, Israel. The prophecy continues, listing other members of the coalition. Cush and Put will be with them. Cush is historically identified with the region south of Egypt, modern-day Sudan and Ethiopia. Put is associated with Libya. Look again at the map of chaos. Libya, a failed state awash with weapons and militias, some with ties to Russian mercenaries and Iranian proxies. Sudan, a nation racked by civil war, a crossroads of extremist ideologies. The prophetic alliance isn't just a list of ancient names. It is a plausible coalition of modern rogue states and regional powers, all orbiting the central axis of Magog and Persia, Russia and Iran. This is no longer interpretation. This is correlation. The ancient prophetic text is functioning like a celestial blueprint laid over the chaotic map of our modern world, and the pieces are fitting together with a precision that is both awe-inspiring and deeply unsettling. The great power from the north has been identified. Its primary, named-in-advance partner has been identified. Iran is not just an enemy of Israel, it is the prophesied enemy, the key southern anchor of the great northern storm, whose gathering clouds are now visible to anyone willing to look up. They are preparing to march. But the invasion described by Ezekiel is a direct, overt military assault. Before that can happen, another, more insidious phase of the plan must be completed. A strategy of strangulation, a ring of fire. A full-scale invasion, the kind Ezekiel describes, is a climactic event. It's the final, desperate lunge for the kill. But a wise predator does not simply charge its prey. It first stalks, it isolates, it weakens, it surrounds. Before the great northern storm makes landfall, a suffocating, oppressive heat must first encircle the target. A ring of fire must be forged, piece by painful piece, until the victim is trapped, gasping for air, with no path of escape. This is the strategy we see playing out today, orchestrated with chilling patience and precision from its nerve center in Tehran. Iran has mastered the art of asymmetrical warfare, the craft of fighting without fighting. It understands that it doesn't need to send its own armies marching across the desert, waving the Iranian flag. Why risk direct retaliation? Why invite the full might of Israeli and American power upon its own soil, when it can achieve its aims through others? Iran's grand strategy is not one of conquest, but of corrosion. It seeks to surround Israel, to bleed it slowly, to exhaust its resources, its will and its people through a relentless multi-front war fought by proxy. It is the strategy of 1,000 cuts, and Iran is the hand that wields every blade. Look to Israel's northern border. The idyllic green hills of the Galilee, a landscape of vineyards and ancient olive groves, lie under a permanent shadow. This is the border with Lebanon, but it is not the Lebanese army that Israel faces. It is Hezbollah, the party of God. Born in the crucible of Israel's 1982 invasion of Lebanon, Hezbollah has grown from a ragtag militia into one of the most powerful non-state military forces in the world. And it is, in every meaningful sense, a division of the Iranian army. Its soldiers are trained by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC. Its ideology is imported directly from the Ayatollahs in Qom. Its funding, its directives, and its astonishing arsenal all come from Tehran. How astonishing! Military intelligence estimates that Hezbollah possesses an arsenal of over 150,000 rockets and missiles. This is not a collection of crude, unguided projectiles. It includes thousands of precision-guided munitions, PGMs, that can strike with pinpoint accuracy anywhere in Israel, from the military headquarters in Tel Aviv to the nuclear facility at Dimona. Imagine the psychological weight of this. Every home, every school, every hospital in Israel lives within range of this Iranian-supplied arsenal. It is a gun pointed permanently at the head of the nation, a constant low-grade terror that can erupt into a firestorm at a moment's notice. This northern front is the strongest, most well-established link in Iran's ring of fire. It is the crown jewel of their proxy empire. Now, turn your gaze to the northeast, to Syria, a nation shattered by a decade of brutal civil war. But where the world saw tragedy, Iran saw opportunity. Under the cover of helping the Assad regime survive, Iran has embedded itself deep within the fabric of the country. The IRGC and its Quds force have established bases, weapon depots, and command and control centers across Syria. They have recruited and armed tens of thousands of Shia militiamen from as far away as Afghanistan and Pakistan, creating a foreign legion loyal only to Tehran. Syria has been transformed into a land bridge, a vital corridor through which Iran can transport advanced weaponry, drones, and personnel directly to Hezbollah's doorstep. More than that, it has become a second front. It is a launch pad from which Iran can, and has, launched direct attacks on Israel using drones and missiles, testing defenses, gathering intelligence, and constantly reminding Israel that the threat is not just from the north, but from the northeast as well. Move south to the Gaza Strip, a crowded, desperate sliver of land ruled by the iron fist of Hamas. While Hamas is a Sunni organization, a theological rival to Shia Iran, the old adage, "the enemy of my enemy is my friend," has never been more true. Iran is the primary patron of both Hamas and the even more radical Palestinian Islamic Jihad, PIJ. It provides them with money, training, and the technological know-how to build their own rockets and tunnels. Every rocket that screams out of Gaza towards the towns of Sderot and Ashkelon, every violent border riot, every incendiary balloon that scorches Israeli farmland, has Iranian fingerprints all over it. Gaza serves as a constant source of attrition, a southern front designed to drain Israel's military resources and terrorize its civilian population. It is a festering wound that Iran ensures will never be allowed to heal. And finally, look further south across the Red Sea to the war-torn mountains of Yemen. Here, another Iranian proxy, the Houthi movement, Ansar Allah, has seized control of the capital and large swaths of the country. For years, the world saw this as a distant, local conflict. But then, the Houthis unveiled their arsenal. Long-range ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and sophisticated suicide drones, all supplied by Iran. They demonstrated the capability to strike deep into Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and then they did the unthinkable. They began launching these weapons at Israel, over 1,500 kilometers away. Suddenly, the ring of fire was complete. North, northeast, south, and now, from the distant southwest, Israel is encircled. This is not a coincidence. This is a meticulously executed grand strategy. It is a living, breathing manifestation of the hostility prophesied to emanate from Persia. This strategy of strangulation serves multiple purposes. It keeps Israel permanently off balance. It tests its military capabilities, particularly its famed Iron Dome air defense system, forcing it to constantly adapt and spend billions. It creates a deterrent, making Israel think twice before striking Iran's most sensitive facilities. And most importantly, it prepares the battlefield for the final, cataclysmic war. When Gog and the armies of the north finally decide to move, they will not be attacking a secure and peaceful nation. They will be attacking a nation already besieged, exhausted, and fighting for its life on 4 separate fronts, its defenses stretched to the breaking point. The prophetic picture of a land being overwhelmed by a multitude from all sides is no longer an abstract image. It is a strategic diagram being drawn in real time by the hand of Iran. The circle is closing. The heat is intensifying. All that is missing is the spark. The one element that can turn this smoldering ring of fire into a global conflagration, the ultimate weapon. For all the rockets of Hezbollah, for all the militias in Syria, for all the terror from Gaza and the long-range threats from Yemen, these are, in the grand scheme of things, conventional weapons. They can cause immense pain, sow terror, and exact a terrible cost in blood and treasure. They can fulfill the strategy of 1,000 cuts. But they cannot, on their own, achieve the ultimate goal declared so openly by Tehran's leaders, the complete and utter annihilation of the State of Israel. For that, you need something more. You need a weapon that can rewrite the laws of war, a weapon that can deliver not just destruction but oblivion. You need the power of the atom. This is the final, terrifying piece of the puzzle, the ultimate catalyst, Iran's relentless pursuit of nuclear capability. The story is a long and deceptive one, a cat-and-mouse game played out for decades in the sterile halls of the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, in Vienna and in the dusty, secret landscapes of Iran itself. It is a tale of hidden facilities buried deep beneath mountains, of centrifuges spinning at supersonic speeds in fortified bunkers, of illicit procurement networks and clandestine scientific research. Iran has always maintained that its program is for peaceful energy purposes only. It is a claim that has been met with deep and persistent skepticism by the international community, and for good reason. The evidence, painstakingly gathered by Western and Israeli intelligence agencies, tells a different story. It tells of a secret military dimension, code-named the Ahmad Plan, which worked specifically on weaponization and designing a nuclear warhead compact enough to fit onto one of their Shahab-3 ballistic missiles. Mossad agents, in one of the most daring intelligence heists in history, spirited away an entire archive of over 100,000 documents and files from a nondescript warehouse in Tehran. Laid bare for the world to see were the blueprints, the simulations, the undeniable proof of a dedicated, clandestine effort to build a nuclear bomb. This isn't about powering cities, this is about acquiring the ultimate sword. Now, consider the implications. An Iran armed with conventional weapons is a regional menace. An Iran armed with nuclear weapons is an existential threat, not just to Israel but to the entire world. It would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the Middle East, triggering a terrifying nuclear arms race as nations like Saudi Arabia and Turkey rush to acquire their own deterrent. It would place the world's most destructive weapon into the hands of a radical, apocalyptic regime that has repeatedly and publicly called for the destruction of another member state of the United Nations. This is the linchpin. This is the red line. A nuclear-armed Iran makes the unthinkable thinkable. The genocidal rhetoric of Haman is no longer just a hateful fantasy. It becomes a technically achievable policy objective. The leaders in Tehran, protected by their own nuclear deterrent, might feel emboldened to unleash their proxies in a full-scale, overwhelming assault on Israel, believing the world would not dare to intervene for fear of nuclear escalation. Or worse, in a moment of supreme crisis, they might be tempted to use the weapon themselves, driven by an eschatological belief that such a conflagration could hasten the coming of their messianic figure, the Mahdi. This is what keeps military planners in Tel Aviv and Washington awake at night. The Israeli doctrine has always been one of prevention. They cannot afford to wait and see if Iran's intentions are truly peaceful. The risk is too great. This was the logic behind Israel's daring 1981 airstrike that destroyed Saddam Hussein's Osirak nuclear reactor in Iraq. It was the logic behind the 2007 strike that obliterated a secret Syrian nuclear facility at Al-Kibar. The message has always been clear. Israel will not permit an enemy sworn to its destruction to acquire the means to achieve it. This creates the most volatile trigger point on the planet. As Iran enriches uranium to higher and higher purities, as it masters the complex science of weaponization, as it gets closer and closer to the breakout point, the moment it has enough fissile material for a bomb, the window for diplomacy closes and the window for military action opens. A preemptive Israeli strike on Iran's nuclear facilities, scattered and heavily fortified as they are, would not be a single clean operation. It would be a massive, complex, and bloody undertaking. And it would, without a shadow of a doubt, ignite the entire region. Iran would retaliate with everything it has. The ring of fire would be unleashed in its full fury. Hezbollah's 150,000 rockets would rain down on Israeli cities. The militias in Syria and Iraq would activate. Hamas would attack from the south. Global oil supplies passing through the Strait of Hormuz would be choked off. The world economy would spiral into chaos. It would be a war of unimaginable ferocity. A war on a scale not seen in the Middle East for generations. A war so catastrophic, so earth-shattering, that it could very well be the spark that ignites the great northern storm of Ezekiel 38. Russia, seeing its key ally under attack, could be drawn in to protect its strategic interests. The stage, so carefully set, would erupt into a global conflict. This is how the final chapter could begin. Not with a slow diplomatic unraveling, but with a sudden, violent flash in the desert night. The nuclear ambition of Iran is the key that turns the lock. It is the element that transforms a regional Cold War into a potential global hot war. It is the ultimate catalyst, potent enough to shatter the seals and open the final blood-soaked pages of the prophetic scroll. The technology of the 21st century is poised to fulfill the fears of the ancient world. The shadow of the atom falls squarely over the mountains of Jerusalem, and the countdown has already begun. Before the bombs fall, before the missiles fly, another war is already being fought. It is a war waged not in the open battlefield but in the shadows. It is a war of whispers and secrets, of quiet assassinations and silent cyber attacks. It is a war of ghosts and phantoms, fought by the unseen hands of spies and saboteurs. This is the covert war between Israel and Iran, a relentless, high-stakes conflict that has been raging for years, just beneath the surface of our awareness. It is the grim overture to the much louder war that may be coming. On one side stands the Mossad, Israel's legendary intelligence agency, whose name is synonymous with audacity and ruthlessness. On the other, the Quds force of the IRGC and Iran's Ministry of Intelligence, MOIS. Their battlefield is the entire globe. It stretches from the bustling streets of European capitals to the remote highways of Southeast Asia, from the placid waters of the Persian Gulf to the humming server farms that power the modern world. The objective of this shadow war is simple: to delay, to disrupt, and to degrade Iran's nuclear program and its malign regional activities without triggering an all-out conventional war. It is a delicate, deadly dance on a razor's edge. The human cost has been precise and personal. One by one, Iran's top nuclear scientists have met violent ends. Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, the widely acknowledged father of Iran's nuclear weapons program, was driving with his wife on a highway outside Tehran. A satellite-controlled, AI-assisted machine gun mounted on a parked pickup truck opened fire with surgical precision, killing him instantly before self-destructing. There was no human assassin on site. It was a scene ripped from a science fiction movie, a chilling demonstration of reach and capability. Before him there were others. Dariush Rezeinejad, shot dead by gunmen on a motorcycle. Masoud Ali Mohammadi, killed by a bomb-rigged motorcycle outside his home. Majid Shahriari, blown up by a magnetic bomb attached to his car in traffic. Each attack was a message, a stark warning sent to the highest echelons of the Iranian regime. We can reach you anywhere. No one is safe. For every scientist eliminated, the program was set back by years, as irreplaceable knowledge and leadership were lost. The war has also been waged against infrastructure. Deep within the heavily guarded Natanz uranium enrichment facility, centrifuges suddenly began to spin out of control, tearing themselves apart in a cascade of destruction. It wasn't a mechanical failure. It was the result of a sophisticated computer worm known as Stuxnet, believed to be a joint US-Israeli creation. It was the world's first true digital weapon, a piece of malicious code designed to physically destroy industrial equipment. It crossed the digital Rubicon, proving that a cyber attack could leap from the virtual world to cause kinetic damage in the real world. Mysterious explosions have rocked other sensitive sites. A missile development facility at Parchin, a petrochemical plant, a power station supplying a secret installation. Iran often blames industrial accidents or technical faults, but the pattern is too consistent, too targeted to be mere coincidence. It is a campaign of sabotage, a steady, attritional war designed to throw sand in the gears of the Iranian war machine. This unseen conflict is a two-way street. Iran and its proxies have relentlessly targeted Israeli and Jewish interests abroad. The 1994 bombing of the Amia Jewish Community Center in Buenos Aires, which killed 85 people, was traced directly back to Hezbollah and its Iranian patrons. Plots to assassinate Israeli diplomats have been foiled in countries like Thailand, India, and Georgia. Iranian cyber units, meanwhile, work tirelessly to penetrate Israel's critical infrastructure, its power grid, its water systems, its hospitals, seeking vulnerabilities that could be exploited to cause chaos in a future conflict. The very seas have become a battleground. Unmarked ghost ships belonging to Iran's IRGC are used to smuggle oil and weapons to its proxies, defying international sanctions. In response, Israeli commandos have reportedly carried out dozens of covert attacks, using limpet mines to disable these vessels in the Red Sea and the Mediterranean. Iran, in turn, has used its own naval forces and drones to harass and attack commercial vessels with ties to Israel, turning vital shipping lanes into a zone of peril. Why is this shadow war so significant in the prophetic context? Because it demonstrates an undeniable truth. The conflict is already underway. It is not a future possibility, it is a current reality. The enmity between Persia and Israel is not just rhetorical, it is active, kinetic, and lethal. Every covert operation, every cyber attack, every explosion in the dark is another log thrown onto the fire, increasing the heat, raising the stakes, and making an eventual open confrontation more likely. This unseen war erodes trust, deepens paranoia, and normalizes aggression. It creates a cycle of retaliation where each side feels compelled to respond to the other's latest move, pushing them further down a spiral of escalation. It is the slow, grinding pressure that causes fractures in the geopolitical bedrock, weakening it until it is ready to collapse under the weight of a major crisis like the finalization of a nuclear weapon. It shows us that the actors are not just waiting in the wings, they are already sparring in the shadows, testing each other's defenses, drawing blood. The ancient animosity of Haman is being played out not with edicts and decrees, but with computer code and shaped charges. It is a grim, modern fulfillment of an ancient hatred, pushing both nations ever closer to the precipice, to the moment when the shadow war can no longer be contained and bursts forth into the terrifying light of day. While the world's attention is fixed on the menacing military hardware and the clandestine operations, another, equally significant drama is unfolding within the borders of Iran itself. It is a story not of steel and fire, but of the human spirit. For the regime in Tehran, for all its outward displays of strength and revolutionary fervor, is built upon a foundation of deep and widening cracks. The very people it rules are becoming its most unpredictable and potentially volatile challenge. This internal struggle is a critical, often overlooked element of the prophetic puzzle. The Islamic Republic projects an image of monolithic unity, of a populace marching in lockstep with its clerical rulers, united by faith and a shared hatred of the West and Israel. The reality is profoundly different. Iran is a nation of 88 million people, the vast majority of whom are young, educated and connected to the outside world through the very internet their government tries so desperately to control. And they are growing restless. For years, a silent rebellion has been simmering. It boils over periodically in waves of massive, courageous protests that are brutally suppressed, only to go dormant and rise again, stronger than before. We saw it in 2009 with the Green Movement, a cry for democratic reform that was crushed in the streets. We saw it in 2019 when a sudden hike in fuel prices triggered nationwide uprisings that were met with live ammunition, killing hundreds, perhaps thousands. And most recently we witnessed the Woman, Life, Freedom movement, ignited by the tragic death of a young woman, Mahsa Amini, in the custody of the morality police. It was a primal scream against decades of oppression. Young women tore off their mandatory hijabs and burned them in public bonfires, an act of defiance of unimaginable bravery. Schoolgirls turned their backs on government officials. University students chanted, "Death to the dictator," not in whispers, but in open-air courtyards. This was not a protest about economic policy, it was a fundamental rejection of the regime's legitimacy and its tyrannical control over every aspect of life. The regime's response, as always, has been brute force. Beatings, mass arrests, sham trials and executions. They have shut down the internet to prevent protesters from organizing and to hide their crimes from the world. But they cannot erase the discontent. It is a fire that now smolders in nearly every Iranian household. The people are choked by a collapsing economy, crippled by international sanctions and endemic corruption. They see the nation's wealth being squandered, not on improving their lives, but on funding foreign wars and proxy militias in Lebanon, Syria and Yemen. They see billions being poured into a nuclear program that brings them nothing but isolation and the threat of war. This internal pressure creates a dangerous and volatile dynamic for the regime's leaders. A government that fears its own people is often a government that is more, not less, likely to act aggressively on the world stage. Why? Because a foreign conflict, a rally around the flag moment, is the oldest trick in the autocrat's handbook for deflecting domestic anger. Imagine a scenario where the protests reach a critical mass, where the regime feels its grip on power is truly slipping. What better way to reassert control and demand unity than to provoke a major crisis with the great Satan, America, or the little Satan, Israel? A limited skirmish, a dramatic missile strike, or the dramatic announcement of a nuclear breakthrough could be used to paint Iran as a victim of foreign aggression, silencing internal dissent in a wave of forced patriotism. A cornered animal is the most dangerous, and the Iranian regime is being increasingly cornered by its own populace. There is also a profound spiritual dimension to this internal struggle. While the government is an Islamic theocracy, a quiet revolution of faith is happening across the country. Christianity is growing faster in Iran than in any other country in the world. Secret house churches, comprised of Muslim background believers, are multiplying in the shadows, forming a vibrant underground network. These are people who have seen the face of radical Islam in their government and have rejected it, embracing a faith of peace and forgiveness at immense personal risk. From a prophetic perspective, this is stunning. In the very heart of the nation identified as Persia, the primary antagonist of Israel in the end times, a remnant is being called out. It mirrors the biblical pattern of God always preserving a faithful few, even in the midst of the most hostile territory, like Lot in Sodom or Daniel in Babylon. This spiritual awakening may not topple the government, but it creates a spiritual counter-narrative within the nation, a force of prayer and hope that stands in direct opposition to the regime's dark ambitions. These internal cracks, the economic desperation, the political rage, and the spiritual awakening mean that Iran is not the stable, monolithic power it appears to be. It is a pressure cooker. The leadership knows that its time may be limited. This desperation could lead them to take greater risks, to accelerate their timelines, to lash out while they still can. They may feel a need to cement their legacy or trigger their apocalyptic prophecies before the foundation of their power crumbles beneath their feet. The instability within Iran is just as crucial a driver of future events as its military power without. It is the hidden variable that could force its hand, turning the key in the lock and setting the final terrible events in motion. As the ring of fire tightens, as the shadow of the atom lengthens, and as the pressure cooker within Iran hisses ever louder, we must turn our gaze back to the epicenter. Back to that tiny nation at the heart of the storm. How does Israel, the prophesied target, perceive this confluence of threats? The answer lies in an ancient concept, a sacred and heavy responsibility that defines the nation's psyche, the burden of the watchman. In the book of the prophet Ezekiel, the same prophet who foretold the great northern invasion, God gives him a solemn charge. Son of man, I have made you a watchman for the house of Israel. Whenever you hear a word from my mouth, you shall give them warning from me. The watchman's duty was simple and stark, to stand on the city walls, to scan the horizon for any sign of an approaching enemy, and to blow the trumpet of alarm at the first hint of danger. If he saw the sword coming and failed to sound the warning, the blood of the people would be on his hands. This ancient duty is coded into the DNA of the modern state of Israel. It is the animating principle behind its intelligence services, its military doctrine, and its political posture. Israel sees itself as the watchman for the entire Jewish people, a people who have learned from the bitterest chapters of history what happens when the warnings are ignored. The Holocaust did not happen in a vacuum. It was preceded by years of escalating hatred, of broken promises, and of a world that chose to look away. The foundational vow of never again is not a mere slogan, it is the watchman's solemn oath. Today, the Israeli watchman stands on the wall and sees not one, but multiple swords approaching. He sees the sword of Hezbollah's precision missiles from the north. He sees the sword of Iranian-backed militias from the northeast. He sees the sword of Hamas's terror tunnels from the south. He sees the long-range sword of the Houthis from the southwest. And above all, he sees the gleaming, terrible shadow of the nuclear sword being forged in the mountains of Iran. This constant, multi-directional threat creates a psychological burden that is difficult for any other nation to comprehend. It means that for Israel, peace is not an assumption, it is a fragile, fleeting exception. Security is not a given. It is a daily, exhausting struggle. Every intelligence report, every satellite image, every snippet of intercepted communication is analyzed with an existential urgency. Is this the one? Is this the signal that the final assault is beginning? This watchman doctrine explains Israel's proactive and often aggressive military posture. It is why they will not hesitate to strike a weapons convoy in Syria, an IRGC commander in Damascus, or a terrorist cell in Jenin. From the outside, these actions can seem disproportionate or provocative. From the inside, from the watchman's perch on the wall, they are defensive necessities. They are attempts to blunt the swords before they can reach the heart of the city. It is the act of shooting the archer, not just the arrow. But the prophetic texts suggest something more. They suggest that despite the watchman's vigilance, a time will come when the onslaught becomes too great to bear. The book of Zechariah, chapter 12, paints a terrifying picture of the final days. Behold, I am about to make Jerusalem a cup of staggering to all the surrounding peoples. And on that day, I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the peoples. All who lift it will surely hurt themselves, and all the nations of the earth will be gathered against it. A cup of staggering, a heavy stone. The imagery is one of a city and a people under an impossible siege, a burden so great that it brings the entire world into the conflict. This is precisely the scenario that Iran's grand strategy is designed to create. The Ring of Fire is the mechanism to make Israel a cup of staggering, forcing it to fight a multi-front war that drains its resources and resolve. The nuclear threat is the heavy stone, a problem so grave that it forces all the nations of the earth to take a side, to involve themselves, to try and lift it, only to be injured in the process. We see the beginnings of this now. Every conflict involving Israel immediately becomes a global issue, dominating the UN Security Council, sparking protests in cities from London to Sydney, and straining diplomatic alliances. The world is increasingly obsessed with this tiny strip of land, just as the prophecies foretold. There is a final, crucial element in the prophetic account of this siege. In the moment of Israel's greatest peril, when all human hope seems lost, when the enemy is at the gates and the watchman's warnings have been overwhelmed by the sheer force of the invasion, the prophecies state that a divine intervention will occur. Ezekiel 38 describes God himself stepping into the battle. In my jealousy and in my blazing wrath, I declare, on that day there shall be a great earthquake in the land of Israel. I will summon a sword against Gog on all my mountains. With pestilence and bloodshed, I will enter into judgment with him. This is the ultimate purpose of the final piece of the puzzle. The role of Persia, Iran, is to be the primary human agent that drives events to this critical juncture. It is to be the catalyst that assembles the coalition, that forges the ring of fire, that raises the nuclear sword, and in doing so, creates a threat so overwhelming that it pushes Israel to the absolute brink of annihilation. It is at that precise moment, the moment of ultimate despair, that the story takes its most dramatic turn. The conflict ceases to be merely a clash of armies and becomes a direct confrontation between God and the nations. Iran's role in this dark theological drama is to set the stage for a divine rescue, an event so spectacular that, as Ezekiel writes, I will magnify myself and sanctify myself, and I will make myself known in the eyes of many nations. Then they will know that I am the Lord. The final piece forces the final move. We stand now at the precipice, looking down into the vortex of history and prophecy. We have followed the threads from the ancient world to the immediate present, and what we find is not a series of random coincidences, but a chilling and coherent pattern, a design. We began with a question: what is the final piece of the prophecy? And now, the answer stands before us, stark and undeniable. It is not a place, not a weapon, not a single event. It is a nation. The final piece is Iran. Let us reassemble the evidence, laying each piece on the table to see the full mosaic. First, we establish the unbreakable historical identity. Persia is Iran. This is not a matter of interpretation, it is a fact of history. The same nation that once saved the Jewish people under Cyrus and later sought to annihilate them under Haman has resumed its ancient role as the ultimate antagonist. The hateful rhetoric of its modern leaders is a direct, chilling echo of Haman's genocidal decree. This historical duality and modern-day enmity form the foundational piece. Second, we turn to the prophetic scroll itself, to the words of Ezekiel, and found Iran's name explicitly mentioned. In the prophecy of the great end-times invasion of Israel, Persia is listed as the chief partner of the great northern power, Magog. This is the cornerstone of the prophetic argument. A 2600-year-old text pinpointed the key Russo-Iranian alliance that is today a dominant feature of global geopolitics. The blueprint matches the reality. Third, we witnessed the manifestation of this hostility in Iran's grand strategy. The Ring of Fire, the meticulously constructed network of proxy forces, the tactical fulfillment of the prophetic vision of Israel being surrounded and attacked from all sides. Hezbollah in the north, militias in the northeast, Hamas in the south, the Houthis in the southwest. This isn't a theory, it is an observable military encirclement, orchestrated and funded by Tehran. Fourth, we confronted the ultimate catalyst, the shadow of the atom. Iran's relentless pursuit of nuclear weapons is the single most destabilizing factor on the planet. It is the element that transforms the threat from regional to existential. It is the trigger that could force a preemptive war, igniting the entire region and potentially drawing in the world powers, creating the very cup of staggering and heavy stone described by the prophet Zechariah. Fifth, we peered into the shadows and saw the unseen war already raging: the assassinations, the sabotage, the cyber attacks. This is not a cold war, it is a hot war being fought below the threshold of public awareness, a constant, grinding conflict that proves the enmity is active and lethal, pushing both sides ever closer to open confrontation. Sixth, we looked inside Iran and saw the cracks in the facade. A restless young population chafing under tyranny, a collapsing economy, a quiet spiritual awakening. This internal pressure cooker makes the regime desperate and unpredictable, potentially driving it to lash out externally to secure its power internally. And finally, we understood the burden of the watchman. We saw how Israel is forced to live under this constant siege, its actions dictated by the solemn vow of never again. Its very existence becomes the focal point of global tension, drawing all the nations into its orbit, just as the prophets foretold. When you assemble all these pieces, the picture they form is complete. Iran is the nation that connects the ancient past to the present. It is the named partner in the key end times prophecy. It is the strategic architect of Israel's encirclement. It provides the technological catalyst for a potential Armageddon. It is driven by internal desperation and is already engaged in active conflict. It is, in every sense, the prime mover, the central human agent in this divine drama. Whether you approach this as a person of faith, seeing the hand of God guiding history, or as a secular analyst of geopolitics, marveling at the uncanny alignment of ancient texts with modern events, the conclusion is the same. The convergence is too precise to be ignored. The final piece of the prophecy is not waiting to be found. It has already been set in place. The key has been forged. The tumblers in the ancient lock are aligning. And Iran, whether its leaders know it or not, is the hand that is now turning that key, preparing to open the final, sealed chapter of the scroller chapter that promises tribulation and fire, but also, in the end, a dramatic and decisive intervention. The world holds its breath. The stage is set. The watchman is on the wall. And the echo of the prophet's words resounds across the millennia, no longer a distant whisper, but the clear, resonant sound of a trumpet announcing a coming storm.